A few years ago, Gordon Ramsay got into a little bit of hot water, and by hot water I mean people were angry at him on the internet because he shot a goat during one of his National Geographic shows, and then he butchered and prepared the goat to be ate, and then they ate it. If you're wondering why I'm talking about Gordon Ramsay and goats, well, I've got a point. But before we get into it, don't forget this video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com. If you're looking to pick up singles or sealed product, they're your best place for it. Use the link in the description below. Kenobi at checkout as well to get 5% off your order. Although there's no FAB singles, just a heads up. But there's plenty of sealed product. In the episode of National Geographic Uncharted, Gordon Ramsay hunts and kills a mountain goat, which they then prepare to eat in a traditional Maori style with the help of a Maori chef and everything. The outrage or the minor annoyance from a load of random people on Twitter was that it was cruel and that they'll never watch Gordon Ramsay again because shooting a goat is bad. And some of these people who were pissed off were vegans and vegetarians, which I think they have more of a right to be pissed off because they've got a moral stance towards the killing of animals for food. And there were a few that were just angry that they had to see someone shoot and kill a goat on TV. I think the problem with the Gordon Ramsay shooting the goat thing for some people is that they don't want the quiet parts said out loud, or the bit that's you compartmentalize and you shove off to the side. You don't want to think about the shooting, killing and butchering of animals for the meat that you eat because it doesn't sit well with you on a moral level. There's been a couple of controversies over the years of people being upset with Gordon Ramsay for shooting and killing deer or goats or whatever on his shows, but at least he's being upfront about the preparation of this meat and this food. On top of all that, something that wasn't contextual in the show, as far as I understand it, was they didn't talk about how mountain goats are an invasive species in New Zealand. They were took there by colonizers hundreds of years ago and don't have a natural predator. So they don't cull them, they just breed and only die of old age. So actually killing mountain goats is part of the conservation efforts of the biomes of New Zealand. As far as I understand it from a quick bit of Googling anyway. But that context was absent from the video, or at least the vast majority of that context was absent from the video. So what's that got to do with Flesh and Blood and Magic the Gathering? Well, okay, Legend Story Studios shredded something like $1.5 million worth of Flesh and Blood cards in a recent, I don't want to say publicity stunt, because I don't think it was designed to be a publicity stunt, but it ended up being one of the most engaged with posts on Twitter.
Newson Zhang, what are you up to?
Just shredding some old gold tunics.
LSS is committed to collectability. Flesh and Blood strives to honor the timeless tradition of collecting worthy works of human craftsmanship. We want players who invest in building their collections to be proud to own something of value. With this in mind, and as a way for fans worldwide to be assured that we are good for our word, we've documented the destruction of the remaining 39
Lucky last one.
extended art gold cold foil Yandao spring tunics for your information and entertainment. We said that the Calling New Jersey was the last ever event that would award a gold tunic, and this is how we stand behind our promise.
And here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Shredded gold tunics.
Now, some of you like me might think that upon seeing that video, it was a parody, perhaps, a joke. I thought it was a joke at first as well. It's the very candid nature of the camera phone recording, the member of staff doing it, shaking his head a little bit as he does it, and I'm not mocking the person doing the voiceover, right? But I don't think their job is voiceovers. It's very dry, the delivery. The cadence is almost, like I said, kind of like a parody, kind of like a voiceover from The Office or something. But lo and behold, they are shredding some quite expensive spring tunics. Now, spring tunics themselves are around $200. It's a constructed staple played in the majority of decks as a one-off as part of your equipment. It's sought after and has had numerous reprintings to try and keep that price tag down. At time of recording, like I said, it's around 160 euros or $200 US. So at first people see constructed staples being put through a shredder by the company that makes the game, and that is not a good look initially. What you've got to remember on social media is that sometimes people watch videos without any sound, and whilst context was added by listening to the video with sound as I just showed it, a few people, and I've seen people comment this, watched it without any sound and thought it was some sort of joke. The truth be told, the things being shredded were not just the spring tunics worth $200. They were actually gold foils. They were spring tunics given to people as part of their remuneration and their winnings for winning what's called a calling, the Flesh and Blood's version of a Magic GP. These gold foils, there's like 50 of them, 39 of them were shred, maybe 11 of them live in the wild. The exact numbers I could be slightly off on, but because their lack of numbers and the fact that it's a promotional super foil that's not found in packs of a card that is super desirable, the cost of it is high. Exactly how high, it's hard to say. I tweeted out trying to find an answer for someone who might be more in the know. I also asked a couple of friends in the Flesh and Blood content creator space as well. I got, in my first hour of looking it up, I got prices between 60,000, 25,000 and 3 to 4,000. I cannot help but find it very funny, the huge disparity on this. If we say it's $25,000, then it's just shy of $1 million worth of promos erased. If we go for the top end, if we look at this 60,000, it's closer to $2.3 million of promos shredded. It makes for a good headline, it's kind of exciting and it's kind of fascinating, right? Well, the reason they were shredding them, as they said in the video, is that they're committed to the idea that when they make a promise, they stick by it. And if there's a promo, in this case 50 copies, and they only give them out to the winners of these events, and some of those events didn't go forward because of COVID, well, they're just gonna shred them up. And that's kind of admirable that they're going to stick to their promise. In reality, it has no real world bearing on the price of Spring Tunic itself, a staple that is still at $200. My initial reaction to this and my retweet of it at the time was that it still looks like bad optics though. Even if the context makes sense, and the delivering on a promise, the video focuses on the entertainment value of destruction as opposed to the creation and the growth of the game. There's no secret that Flesh and Blood has a bit of an optics problem with other card gamers. The amount of Magic players that tell me that Flesh and Blood is not a real game, or they still think it's a scam, when I've done fucking videos explaining that it's not a scam, that number is unusually high still. I do think that Alpha Investments, who helped support the game and helped it grow initially anyway, his ongoing involvement with the game does lead some people to be skeptical of the game. Also, don't forget, new card games come and go all the time, most of them die, so the fact that everyone bought in really hard, that CFB and SCG were straight in there trying to promote the game immediately, it did make people think, is this a pyramid scheme? So to see them shred millions of dollars of promos to keep those promos prices up, it's going to sit badly with Magic players. In the same way that you can be a meat eater, but you don't want to have the video of someone shooting and butchering an animal in front of you because it says the quiet part out loud. It says the thing that you want to push off to the side and not think about. During the editing, I wanted to actually go back and clarify something I'm saying. I keep saying the quiet part out loud, which normally refers to subtext. It really is normally, people dog whistling for dodgy causes. So perhaps I should move away from that phrase, or maybe clarify that phrase. That's not what I'm saying. There's not subtext here where they're laughing at poor people that can't afford the promos. I'm more so talking about the uncomfortable elements of consumerism and rampant consumerism, the waste and things like that. I'll talk more about it later in the video, but I just want to clarify that that statement doesn't really fit with what I was saying without recording whole chunks where I've said this phrase twice. So I thought it was responsible of me just to butt in there and say that. Before I unpack that a bit further, I want to give Legend Story Studios a chance to talk about this. So I reached out to them. I was already in talks with them, full transparency, because they invited me to Pro Tour Lille and the Calling in Lille in France. And to be honest, I've been planning to go to a Calling for like a year, but with COVID and like a war in the Ukraine and stuff, things were a little bit uncomfortable with some of the places. I didn't feel safe going to them, but now I'm finally going to the one in France. So full transparency, they're flying me out there, they're paying me an appearance fee. So this video is in slightly brought to you by Legend Story Studios. But I'm also being really fucking honest that I think the optics of this exercise were terrible. But with that said, I wanted to give Legend Story Studios a chance to talk about the context around that. Here we have Chris Pierce, one of the LSS founders, speaking about the topic of the shredded promos.
Hi, I'm Chris, one of the founders at Legend Story Studios. About a month ago, LSS posted a video in which we shredded the final remaining gold cold foil Fandel Spring Tunics. It was one of the most viewed and commented on posts that we've ever done, and it prompted a lot of interesting discussion about what was going on and why we did it. So first, just some context. The Fandel Spring Tunics that were shredded were part of a special series of prize cards that were produced to be handed out to the top performing players at our elite organised play events. They were always limited in quantity, and the players had worked very hard to win these. Pro Tour New Jersey marked the last opportunity for players to win one of these, after which we resolved to destroy the remainder so that players and collectors could have complete confidence every one of these cards that was ever going to exist had been handed out. A couple of interesting questions actually then came up as a result of this. One of them was, well, isn't it wasteful to produce excess cards? Shouldn't you just print to demand and produce exactly what you need? The reality is, for us, printing more than what we need is actually the way that minimises the amount of wastage of product that is made here. It's important to understand that you can't just print one of these cards, that you have to print these off in sheets, and also that when these cards are being made, because of the high grade standards that are being worked to, there are actually test runs of them that are done before the main production is run. And so you also need some cards extra to allow for the possibility of damage as the cards are being transported to different events. So yeah, we don't want to do this twice. We only want to make sure that we have some replacements on hand. And so for us, producing some small additional quantity is actually very important. It minimizes the amount of wastage that happens in the process of producing all the promos that we use. Second question that came up is, shouldn't we have done something more socially useful with these? Should we be supporting charities with them, for example, instead of simply destroying them? For us, there's kind of two separate considerations here. One of them is, should we support charities? And the second one is, how should we do it? As a studio, we certainly do support charities. We had an auction of Flesh and Blood memorabilia on eBay that raised over $50,000 for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. We also donated all the proceeds from the Calling Krakow to Polish Humanitarian Action to support their work with refugees from Ukraine, and there's various other events that that we have supported that have raised funds for charities. For example, the Battle Hardened Auckland event, which supported the New Zealand Cancer Society. So for us, supporting charities is very important, but handing out our premier prize material for that purpose isn't something we feel comfortable doing. These cards were always a very limited run of trophies that reflected the exceptional performance of players in competitive fab, and for us, we will find other ways to support charities that align with our values. But handing out the premier prize material is just not a place that we feel comfortable going in terms of that. So, look, thanks for the opportunity to discuss this, and look forward to seeing you and Leal at the end of August.
Like I said, I believe the main issue with the Flesh and Blood video is the optics of the game already, and adding on top of that the sort of like wanton destruction of expensive promos when people are struggling to get hold of their spring tunics. And although I've already acknowledged that it doesn't change the price of the spring tunic in the market, celebrating the lengths you're going to reprint competitive staples to make them accessible whilst having expensive promotional items would be a much better use of energy and time, I would think, in order to give your game a better look to the outsider onlooker. But on top of that, it did draw attention to the fact that there's a lot of waste and destruction when it comes to limited edition items. This is not a unique thing just to Flesh and Blood. When first edition printings of comic books are made, there will be large amounts that are destroyed in spite of the final product being worth money. And Magic does this too, as the other big card game in the room, the big card game that I'm associated with and talk about the most. I did a video recently talking about the rarest cards in Magic, things rarer and sometimes more expensive than a Black Lotus, so I'll link that in the description below. And one of those cards, or two of those cards should I say, is the 1996 World Champion and the Shinjufuku Dragon. I fucked that up, haven't I? They are the two one-off cards that have ever been printed in Magic. Well, there's a few others I didn't mention in the video, but they're the two ones that were given out, one as a prize for a tournament, the World Championship in 1996, and one as a commemorative piece to be framed and kept in the DCI Tournament Center in Japan. Whilst it's not heavily documented exactly what went on, there are reports that both the World Champion card and the Dragon both had people, or people from Wizards of the Coast, ceremoniously shredding the other cards from the sheet in order to preserve the uniqueness of that card. Of course, both these things happened back in 1996, which wasn't pre-internet, but it was a lot more earlier than all of this on Twitter with retweets from myself and Saffron Olive. I also think Wizards would be, and I don't mean this is a slight Legend Story Studios, but I'm going to say it, I think they'd be smarter, well, actually it's Wizards, so who the fuck knows. I think they'd be smarter than to show the shredding and destruction on a social media post. Like, if this happened tomorrow, if a one-off card was created for the Worlds event and given out to the Magic player who wins that, and they ceremoniously shredded the other 11, perhaps if they did it during the broadcast with enough context, people wouldn't care, but it's still gonna piss people off. I've got a video coming up where one or two booster packs get cut a little bit during a stunt, during a thing, and I already know that some of the comments are going to be shitty towards me because of that destruction. People don't take lightly to the destruction of property that other people own, especially if it is valuable and sought after cards. But the reason I draw attention to it like the Gordon Ramsay thing is that A, with more context, it becomes less egregious. And B, it's kind of that bit that people don't want to admit to. That there's huge amounts of waste in every production of all our hobbies and things that we do. I myself often battle the idea that I should be more of an ethical meat consumer, and that if meat substitutes were commonplace, I would happily move away from consuming meat because there is an ethical element to it that makes me feel uncomfortable. On the other side of that, we've got an issue with packaging and waste when it comes to hobbies like card games. How many boosters have you opened where you've opened Even the rare might be chaff, but let's say you keep the rare just in case in your bulk box, but the rest of it ends up in a bin or in a landfill somewhere or in a drawer eventually to go into a landfill when you finally have to move home and get rid of all those commons and uncommons. And then the packaging as well. Credit where credit is due, Wizards have tried to do that sort of packaging that you can recycle back when Modern Masters 2 happened, and they failed. It was not a successful experiment. And in recent years, with Everfest, Legend Story Studios have successfully made recyclable packaging for booster packs. Whilst the wastage in the original video is about expensive promos worth, you know, $1 million or upwards, I do think it also asks a question about the wastage that is involved with the production of these things. I'm not saying that the creation of everything and anything has to be carbon footprint zero or net zero or below zero. I'm using the wrong terminology there. Not everything has to be completely sustainable in itself, but if you are creating a lot of product that is wasteful and unrecyclable in one regard, as in the premium card stock that you use for Magic, Flesh and Blood, or whatever trading card game it is you collect, then perhaps you need to offset that somewhere else by investing in green initiatives, or perhaps just making your packaging fucking recyclable. The other thing that I was leaving to the very end to mention about the comparison between the Gordon Ramsay example for 2019 and this, weirdly they both happened in New Zealand, so I thought that was kind of poetic in a sense. But the Gordon Ramsay one was really, there was a load of people being shitty on Twitter, but none of them really gained any traction. A lot of them were either angry vegans or people just uncomfortable with the idea that the animals that you eat have to be unalived first. But several news organisations ran with it and called it an outrage, and before you know it, it's remembered as an outrage by someone like me. When I look back on it, it seems like less of an outrage than what I remember it being. And the same can be said for the Legend Story Studios shredding some promos. There's context in the video. It's a few seconds later. You might have even turned the sound off by that point. Some people will be watching without sound. But it's people like myself and Saffron Olive and people who are signal boosting that to then create this drama inadvertently, not on purpose, right? That was never my intention. My intention was to point out how I don't think you've got to convince Magic players that Flesh and Blood is a real game, and shredding expensive promos right in front of them and celebrating it is not how you do that, regardless of the context. So I'm going to be at the Calling and the Pro Tour in Lille this weekend, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm a casual scrub. I've actually not been to an event with Flesh and Blood. I've only played in my house on my kitchen table with friends, so I'm going to get absolutely destroyed. I'm actually quite excited to see a large event that is not Magic. I've never been to a non-Magic gaming tournament and event around it. I've been to Comic-Cons and such, but I'm excited to see the cosplayers and the guests, and there's a ton of side events too. I only know how to play Classic Constructed right now, but there's Blitz events, the sealed deck for the new set. I'd never drafted this before, but I think I'm going to give it a go. In many ways, it's kind of what I want to see alongside the Command Fest of Magic, right? I want to see more side events celebrating every possible way to play your card game, not just the one way. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. Are you still angry at them for shredding the promos, or do you think with added context it kind of makes sense? Do you also think that perhaps we do try to hide the fact or ignore the fact that there's so much waste product and other things coming out of card games that when it confronts us in our face, we kind of shudder at the thought of it? If you're going to be at the Pro Tour or the Calling in Lille this weekend, let me know in the comment section below. I'll be wandering around the show floor and I can't wait to meet people, and I guess I'm not signing cards. I don't have a Flesh and Blood card associated with me yet. Maybe one day if I win something with Prism before she gets Living Legend status. Isn't that funny that I built a deck, I'm playing in my kitchen, and she might go to Living Legend status before I even get to play with her? Whoops. I'll see you at the side events, I'll see you at the main event. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. See you soon. Ta-ta for now.